What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We're here with some more NFL DFS picks and lineup advice for DraftKings and FanDuel. This time for the single game showdown slate on Thursday Night Football. It is the Washington Commanders and the Green Bay Packers. In this video, we will discuss the injuries that impact the slate, talk a little bit about usage in Week 1 for both of these teams, how to play low-risk contests on DraftKings and FanDuel, the core plays for tonight, and then we'll transition and give you some strategies and picks and ideas for the biggest contests that DraftKings and FanDuel have to offer and how you can win those biggest prizes. Welcome, I'm Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy, single game $1 million winner. Returning viewers, welcome back. If you're new here, we are glad to have you. Quick programming note, again, I said this in the Monday video, but this upcoming Monday is a 2-game slate. We will have a live stream for that, not a pre-recorded video. So make sure you subscribe to the channel to get notified whenever we schedule that and when we'll go live before the 2 Monday night games here in a couple of days. And of course, Chris will have his main slate video posted tomorrow night. I know a lot of you look forward to that. So make sure you're subscribed. You'll get notified when he posts it. So let's move into tonight's game, Packers and the Commanders. And let's look at the injury report. We'll start on the Green Bay side, the home team, and 2 injuries that are certainly impactful that you will not see in the player pool are the availabilities of 2 offensive linemen. It's Aaron Banks, their left guard, and it is Zach Tom, their right tackle. Both are extremely questionable. They did not practice all week. Now, because it was a short week, Green Bay didn't have normal practices, a lot of walkthroughs, a lot of very simple practices. In the practice estimation reports, neither of these guys would have practiced in any of the 3 days. Head coach Matt LaFleur said they are veterans and he'll give them up until game time. Green Bay is notoriously conservative when it comes to injury, so you'd have to imagine that unless these guys are feeling pretty good, that they'll probably sit in this game. It's hard to know for sure. We'll know probably by 4 p.m. Eastern. We said that on Monday with the practice squad elevations, and Chicago didn't elevate any cornerbacks, and still their top 2 cornerbacks were out indeed. Still, most of the time when we get practice squad elevations, if Green Bay elevates a couple of linemen tonight, we'll probably know the availability of Aaron Banks and Zach Tom. So if they're out, that certainly downgrades the Green Bay offense. Technically, Micah Parsons, their edge defender that they got from the Dallas Cowboys that everyone knows about before Week 1, he is technically questionable, but he is expected to play. He was on a bit of a snap count in Week 1. They'll continue to ramp him up over the next few weeks, but he'll play in essential passing downs for Green Bay's defense. Now, go over to Washington. Again, no impactful injuries in the player pool, but Dietrich Wise, one of their top edge rushers, he is questionable for tonight. Limited practice on Wednesday. No one really knows what happened. I expect him to play tentatively. We'll see. But if he's out, maybe that offsets some of the loss of if right tackle Zach Tom is out for the Packers tonight. So again, these are not injuries that dramatically impact your player pool and your selections for tonight, but they do impact the game. And most projection systems do not account for these types of injuries. So just monitor the news throughout the day. And of course, we'll update our daily plug at occupyfantasy.com when we find out anything. All right, before we get into the picks for tonight, I think it is important, especially this early in the season, to talk about previous week usage. So what we saw in Week 1 versus what we expected back in our fantasy drafts, best ball drafts, etc., and see if it's a fluke or see if there's some underlying usage that we can utilize for tonight's game. So we start with Green Bay. I think most people, once Marshawn Lloyd, their second-year running back, once he was injured and put on injured reserve to start the season, I think most people believe that Emmanuel Wilson will be the guy who becomes the running back 2 behind Josh Jacobs. Now, Jacobs is a guy that doesn't come off the field that often, so it's not a hugely important role, but it wasn't Wilson. It was actually Chris Brooks who was the first man off the bench. Now, Jacobs played 88% of the snaps last week against the Lions, so again, even in Week 1, didn't come off the field that much. But Emmanuel Wilson only played in garbage time the last few snaps of the game. It was Chris Brooks who spelled him on both early downs and on third downs when Jacobs needed a breather. So Chris Brooks is just $400 on DraftKings. He's the running back 2 tonight. Typically, we see running back 2s, even if they're not that impactful. Think Will Shipley back in Week 1. They're up at $2,000, $3,000. So a bit of a discount on Chris Brooks here. Again, not someone that's going to put up 10 plus fantasy points outside of an injury. But if you're looking for a couple of points at the minimum price, Brooks can certainly provide that tonight. Now, I think the most talked about and the obvious situation that will probably determine tonight's slate is the Green Bay wide receiver situation. So we look at snaps in Week 1. And again, this might be a bit of an anomaly because of how the game was out of hand mostly in the second half against the Lions, and they rotated guys perhaps a bit more. But here's how it broke down. So Romeo Doubs, he played 71% of the snaps. He led the team. He was the wide receiver 1 last week. You'll see he's $4,000 on DraftKings. He should not be $4,000 on DraftKings. We go to FanDuel, Romeo Doubs is 6,300 in the MVP, which means he is 4,200 in the flex. No idea who was doing pricing for either site, but the wide receiver one should not be $4,000 on either site. He's a massive value, and he will be incredibly popular on both sites tonight. Now, we look at the rest of the guys after Romeo Doubs. Jaden Reed, who was drafted, top 10 rounds in best ball drafts, dealing with that foot injury, dealing with a Jones fracture, which basically in recent times, no wide receiver has played through without getting surgery. Reed is going to attempt to do that. Now, slot only receiver, and with the addition of Matthew Golden, who we'll get to in a second, and with his foot injury, maybe they limited him, but he only played in 3 wide receiver sets in week 1, only played 18 total snaps. So if they continue to monitor him and try to manage his workload, again, a conservative medical staff in Green Bay, we shouldn't see Jaden Reed play too much. So at $8,200, probably overpriced. However, if, again, it was 1 week, if this game is more competitive, they run more 3 wide receiver sets, Reed will undoubtedly play more. So it just depends on how this game plays out. As for Golden, the rookie draft pick, he and Dontavian Wicks. So we see Golden 6,400. We see Wicks at 3,600. These guys basically split the other outside role across from Romeo Doubs. Wicks played in 2 wide receiver sets, and Golden played in 3 wide receiver sets. So a really interesting dynamic there, where very specific roles for these guys. Now, no one's going to play Matthew Golden tonight because of his price. We got him under 20% projected ownership on both sites. But I will say, though, the touchdown that Tucker Kraft caught in week 1 against the Lions, Golden was also wide open. If he catches that touchdown, perhaps the narrative is a bit different on how his first NFL game went. Either way, Matthew Golden, we expect stock up. If anything, he's going to take more snaps away from Dontavian Wicks, maybe even Romeo Doubs. But Golden's a guy that week 1 was probably the floor in terms of snap count for him. Let's see here. Anyone else? Yeah, Savion Williams, their other rookie draft pick, missed a lot of camp. He only played a handful of snaps, 6% of the snaps in week 1. He did get a design touch in the first quarter. So he's a guy that maybe, even though at $1,000 won't play a ton, if he's on the field, it's probably for a legitimate reason, a very distinctive purpose. So just someone to mix in if you're building 20-plus lineups, knowing that he could get a designed or manufactured touch or 2. Finally, Malik Heath, he was probably the biggest beneficiary of the game being out of control. He played, how many snaps did he play? He played 23% of the snaps. Most of those came in the second half. Would not expect him to impact the game unless it's out of hand once again. All right, I know that's a lot to say, and we haven't even gotten to any picks yet, but it's important to know the context of week 1 and how they fit into the pricing for tonight. Now, just as important, let's go over to Washington. Everyone's favorite hype man, Bill Krosky-Merritt, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, $7K on DraftKings tonight. Austin Eckler, $6,800. So what happened in week 1? Austin Eckler started the game and played every single first quarter snap, and I was watching the game thinking, so are we randomly just going to get workhorse Austin Eckler this year at his age? But then after the first quarter, not really sure why this happened, but Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt completely outsnapped both Austin Eckler and their other running back that was active, Jeremy McNichols. Remember, Chris Rodriguez was a healthy scratch. He outsnapped those guys 22-9 on early downs, so first and second downs. Didn't really play many third downs. Austin Eckler got all the third down snaps, all the 2-minute drills, so the hurry up snaps as well. So very defined plan for these guys. Shout out to PFF for this data, by the way, Pro Football Focus. So what we'll see tonight. And again, I don't know what happened in the first quarter there. I imagine what we saw in the last 3 quarters will be more representative of what happens tonight and moving forward. But expect Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt to get most of the early down work, and expect Austin Eckler to mix in some on early downs, but also get all of the receiving and passing down work. So they're priced similarly. How their production plays out will be how effective is JCM on the ground, and will there be more 2-minute or passing down snaps for Austin Eckler depending on the game flow. That's going to depend on the story you tell with your lineup. All right, guys, I think that does it for the usage for week 1. If you guys like that, let me know in the comments, but I think it's extremely important before we get into all the picks. I know the hashtag picks guys are out there, want the picks. Fast forward to this section in future videos. It is important to know the context. All right. So low risk contests, 50-50s, double ups, head-to-heads in DFS where you just have to beat half the field to double your money. Try to lock up all the scoring, as you know. So if we do it tonight, the top 3 projected guys by far are Jaden Daniels, Josh Jacobs, Jordan Love. Their projections are much better than every other player on the slate in terms of raw fantasy point projections. You want to get these guys in no matter what into your low risk lineups. These are the 3 core guys tonight. So get them in. At least $4,300 left per player. We talked about Romeo Doubs, completely mispriced on both sites. In low risk contests, not only do we want to try to lock up all the scoring, we want to play any obvious mispriced guys. Romeo Doubs certainly qualifies. So we play Doubs. At least $4,450 left per player. You could do something like Chris Brooks, who we talked about, give you a couple points at min price, pay up for Jaden Reed, a little risky given Reed's snap counts. You could play a little more balanced. You could play Dontavian Wicks, Noah Brown. These guys are wide receiver threes for their respective teams, 5,300. And then you could play a kicker. That's not bad as well. Another option, I think we'll see some people do this, is play Romeo Doubs at captain and then fit in an extra mid-range guy and not have to punt anything. So we play Jaden Daniels next. That leaves 6,200 left per player. You could play someone like Eckler, who has probably a safer floor when it comes to fantasy points with his receptions, and then play Kraft, who's going to be popular, or a kicker. So different ways to play it. Go over on FanDuel. Similar. Play the top three guys in Jane Daniels, Josh Jacobs, and Jordan Love. We played Dobbs, who is extremely cheap at 4,200. That leaves us 5,500 left per player. We could play Tucker Kraft at 5K. Again, mispriced, ran a ton of routes last week. One of the top leaders in snap share for tight ends in week 1. Tucker Kraft. We could play Matthew Golden, Commanders defense. Different ways to play it. But these are the 4 guys, the 4 core plays for tonight. They will all be extremely popular. They are all integral into your low-risk lineups tonight, and you're going to want to mix them in heavily, probably 3 of these 4 guys, if not all 4, depending on how low of ownership your other 2 guys in your roster spots have in high-risk contests. I think that covers low risk. It's pretty straightforward tonight. Let's see. Yeah. So you play the 4 guys, figure out the other 2 spots. All right, before we move on to high-risk contests, it's time for the water sip break. Let's get hydrated. Returning viewers, you know what to do in the comments. New viewers, just watch the comments after the fact, and you'll see what to do, how to support the channel after the water sip segment. All right, high-risk contests, leagues, GPPs, satellites. These are contests where you have to beat a lot of people to win a lot of money. And in order to win the biggest prizes, like when I won the $1 million on DraftKings back in the Super Bowl a few years ago in a showdown contest, you have to get different. And there are different strategies that you can deploy. So if we're looking at tonight, I think first and foremost, if we look at captain and MVP ownership on both sides, it is extremely concentrated on those big 3 I talked about, Jaden Daniels, Josh Jacobs, Jordan Love. On FanDuel, they could account for 80+% of the MVP ownership. So the absolute easiest way tonight is just not play one of those guys. Yes, they all have high floors, high ceilings as well. But if we can play most receivers, if not all receivers, at 10% or less ownership at captain and MVP in a game where the total is 49 points, yes, I know Green Bay is rotating guys. It doesn't matter. All these guys have huge ceilings. So Terry McLaurin, 4% projected captain ownership, even less over on FanDuel. Yes, he had a very down week 1. Let's put him at captain just for emphasis here. Terry McLaurin. I'm going to try to put him at captain one more time. There we go. Yes, Debo outproduced him, out-usaged him in week 1. But we were talking about this in our Discord this morning, recording this Thursday morning late around 10 a.m. But earlier this morning in Discord, this is a reminder. Every year, we always talk about this, but average draft position is more predictive of future performance than early season production through week 4. So the first month of the season through September, average draft position is more predictive than what just happened. So yes, we saw Terry McLaurin have a down game in week 1, but he was a 4th-round draft pick in best ball contests, in your home leagues, maybe even higher. That is more predictive than what happened in week 1. Once we get to October, average draft positions out the window. What happened to September is more predictive. So you can take advantage of this if there's any ownership differences between guys on what we expected to happen in preseason versus now, then we need to take advantage of that. Terry McLaurin is a prime example. Do we expect Terry McLaurin to continue to get a couple targets per game? Absolutely not. Not after he got that contract. Remember, he missed most of camp, right? So maybe, getting back in the shape, getting back in the swing of things, connecting with Jaden Daniels. Terry McLaurin's a guy that we will gladly take low ownership at captain MVP on when we've seen him have massive games in the past. On the Packers side, yes, Romeo Doubs is cheap, and people will play him in jam and studs, but no one's going to leave salary with Romeo Doubs. If Romeo Doubs is out there for 75% plus of the snaps, and he could be the highest scorer. We've seen it a couple times in his career. If Romeo Doubs is the highest scorer, you can leave a lot of salary on the table. And the way I think about this, let's put Romeo Doubs at captain, 6K. We've gotten questions about this before. If I play Doubs at captain and I expect him to be a highest scorer, how much salary can I leave on the table? What I would do is think about if he was appropriately priced, what is that price difference between what he's currently priced? So if we take him out, right, and Romeo Doubs is 4K, you can do this exercise on FanDuel as well. If he was appropriately priced as the wide receiver 1, he's probably in the Jaden Reed area, maybe as low as JCM, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. So 7K to 8,200. So that means he is mispriced by $3,000 to $4,000, roughly, in our eyes. So that means whatever you would normally leave on the table in a showdown lineup, you can leave $3,000 to $4,000 more in a Romeo Doubs captain if you believe that he can be the highest scorer. Same way in the flex as well. So just keep that in mind as you're building lineups, as you're setting rules in our lineup builder. This type of rule is especially helpful where you can do this special custom salary rules in our lineup builder, where when Romeo Doubs is in the lineup, use X salary versus when he's not, use this salary. I use that all the time, and it's especially important for situations like this. I mean, you could also play Jaden Reed if he plays more snaps tonight. Matthew Golden, again, in the flex as well. Everyone is overlooking him after his week 1 performance. Matthew Golden, an excellent low ownership play. Again, we have him under 20% projected on both sites. So the receivers are the keys to tonight, without question, for high-risk contests. Let's see here. Anything else? The final angle that we'll take tonight, it worked on Monday Night Football, playing a defense in the Bears defense. Now, if the Packers linemen are out and you believe that that can impact the Packers offense, which it certainly could. It obviously could if you're missing 2 of your starting 5 offensive linemen. What can we do? We could play Washington heavy lineups and or play the Washington defense. We don't expect either defense to be popular tonight. The Commanders defense is just 4,400 on DraftKings. Now, if you're playing them, you're thinking Jordan Love doesn't have time to throw. They can't get the offense going. More points for the opposing defense. So you can play Washington heavy lineups. And on that note, it's somewhat related. If Washington is competitive and or leading in this game, that likely means more snaps for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. So Washington heavy lineups and Washington defense lineups are going to be extremely positively correlated with Bill Krosky-Merritt here because of his role in early downs and his likelihood of getting more carries if they're leading and handing the ball off on 1st and 2nd down. Now, if this game is close and or Washington is trailing in the second half, and if we just get some random 2-minute snaps, if Washington gets 1 or 2 2-minute drills, it's going to be Austin Eckler more important than JCM. And if JCM gets 10 or less touches, doesn't do anything with it, Eckler gets a few catches, he's going to outscore him. So the story you're telling with your lineup is going to depend on which running back you're going to play from Washington, if any at all. If it's just a normal game, it's very easily that both of these guys bust. But if it goes one way or the other in any extreme, either one could be extremely valuable for tonight. And JCM especially, I keep calling him JCM just because it's easier to abbreviate that way, especially in text form. He is much lower owned than Austin Eckler tonight. So we have him under 20%, may even be under 10% in some contests, depending, because he's not a great value by projections. Excellent high-risk play. Just fits really nicely into if you're playing the Washington is more competitive and or leads this game because of Green Bay's offensive line injuries angle tonight. Whew. That should do it. But I think it's a pretty straightforward slate, especially if you dove deep into week 1 like we did in this video. Now, our writer Bisma will go into even more detail in the daily plug later this afternoon. That'll be up at OccupyFantasy.com. Link is in the description. His rankings for tonight, his slate notes, his lineup construction tips for various contests on DraftKings and FanDuel. Our Occupy model is already up and running with the projected ownership. So all the ownership I talked about in this video, you go check out full ownership for every player for FanDuel and DraftKings in our model and in our lineup builder. And all that is available at OccupyFantasy.com for as low as $7 per week. We do these videos for free to help a lot of people. But if you want that extra edge, OccupyFantasy.com is where you can get that. Goes into more detail, more tools, more stats, more data, more content. Then this video, you'll love it. I promise. All right. For Brian, I'm Occupy. Any questions? I did it again. For Occupy, I'm Brian. Maybe 2 days in a row we'll get that right. For Occupy, I'm Brian. Thanks for listening. Any questions, drop a comment below. We'll happily answer them before the game starts tonight. We appreciate you. Good luck and enjoy the Packers and the Commanders.